In this episode of Culinary Nutrition, we're going to be talking about steaming. And one of the best ways to illustrate the steaming method of cooking, which is a wet method of cooking, is to show you en papillote. Basically, this means fish cooked in paper. You can cook pretty much anything in paper if it's thin enough, but fish, shellfish, mollusks, those are the things that you most commonly see. In our previous episode, we talked about blanching, and we're going to use the vegetables that we blanch in our papillote. This was a method of cooking that came into its own, really came into its own in the 17th, 18th centuries, especially amongst women, because you could cram a whole lot of food in here and nobody could see how much you were eating. Women were thought to be very voluptuous if they were kind of fuller figured, and I guess you have to consume a lot of calories to keep that fuller figure. So what I've done is I've taken the spinach and I've put it on the bottom. And this is tilapia. Now when you buy fish, the fish you buy should really have not much odor at all. If it has odor, it's probably been out of the water too long and you don't want to eat it. You want to buy your fish as close to the time you're going to eat it as possible. There are some companies that again sell IQF fillets, individually cooked frozen. That's the next best thing to fresh, but it's certainly one step above fish sticks. So I've made a bed out of the wilted spinach that I blanched and shocked. I put my tilapia on top. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add carrots. The more colorful your diet is, the more healthy your diet is. So I'm trying to incorporate as many colors in here as possible. And again, I blanched all these vegetables so they're going to be al dente. They're not going to be overcooked. My big thing with vegetables and with fish is that the reason that most people don't like it is because it's overdone. Your fish should still have a little bit of moisture in it. Your vegetables should still have crunch and color to it. What good is food if nobody wants to eat it? And you know what people say about vegetables is, well, eat your vegetables, they're healthy for you. Well, not necessarily if they're coated in butter and trans fat. So we are going to add a small amount of butter to this, but I'm going to put the emphasis on small amount of butter. Again, butter is not your enemy. Fat isn't your enemy. Excess calories are your enemy. And you can pack on a whole lot of calories in a very small amount of fat. So you want to be very, very mindful of the types and the amount of fat that you're eating. So we're going to put our red bell peppers in there. We've got some julienne yellow squash. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 colors so far. And plus some varying shades of green. We've got a little bit of our blanched garlic. We've got some chopped green onions, our concassade tomatoes, and I'm going to use a little bit of fresh oregano. Now when you add fresh herbs, you always add fresh herbs at the end of the cooking process, not at the beginning. If you add them at the beginning, you're going to lose all the flavor in your fresh herbs while it's cooking. They really do bloom the best at the end. So I'm going to use a little bit of kosher salt. I don't tend to use a lot of iodized salt in savory cooking. I save that more for baking because it's a smaller grain. Iodine was added to salt to help fight goiter around the world, and it's done that. But you don't necessarily, I think our diets are probably rich enough in iodine that we don't need to use that all the time. And I kind of like the way that the salt crystals feel in my fingers when I'm putting it on the food. You can really get an idea of how much you're putting on the food when you can feel what it is that you're doing. Now I'm going to put a little bit of fresh cracked pepper in here. Now, when I say a little bit of butter, I mean to some people this may be horrifying, but to the culinary industry, that's a little bit of butter. We're probably looking at maybe a tablespoon. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to fold it over. You want to figure usually 8 minutes per inch. Okay, now, so to complete the fold, your first fold is the most important. Make a sharp angle and then really crease your paper. Now, every fold after that has to overlap onto your first fold. If they don't overlap, the steam will escape. And if the steam escapes, you won't steam your fish. This is a very dramatic presentation, as you will see. You just wrap this in your paper, you throw it in the oven. With fish, you figure 8 minutes per inch of thickness. So this tilapia is probably about 1 inch thick, so we'll figure about 8 minutes on this. You can tell with these because the paper puffs up and turns brown. And now when you see a waiter walking through a dining room with this and they put it on the table in front of the diner, and the diner opens that bag, and that big waft of garlic and fresh herbs and vegetables comes out, there's nothing like it. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to put it on this half sheet pan here, and we're going to put this in the oven. Okay, now this is our finished product. I put it into a convection oven at about 500 degrees for roughly 8 minutes. Most of you may not have a convection oven at home. A conventional oven works fine. The thing that you want to look for is big puffy brown paper. If the paper's not brown, if it's not puffy, it didn't mean that everything's steamed. It's the steam that makes this blow up. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, I'm going to put it on the plate, and we're going to open up the bag. So that's what I mean by the dramatic presentation. Let's see, our fish is perfectly done. Our butter is melted, leaving us with some nice herbs on top. This is called a compound butter. Now there's a difference between melting butter and softening butter. With compound butter, what I did was I took some butter, left it out at room temperature, mixed in some salt, some pepper, some garlic, some dried herbs, and I added that to the fish to give it a little bit more flavor. You don't just want to add unflavored butter. With flavored butter and some herbs, you really kind of make the flavors of the ingredients come out. So there we have it. Fish and paper, pesce and cartoccio, fish and papayot, whatever you want to call it. I call it yummy.